I'm going to talk about our design workflow, right? How we actually do design work at Modern Tribe, at the company that I work at. These are my two partners and me. They do not live in Minnesota, so I get to draw funny things on their faces. They don't ever come see me speak. These are the folks that I work with. This is our trip in Belize. We're currently hiring. Just going to toss that out there. If you know of Modern Tribe, it's probably because you've interacted with the events calendar, which is great. Best events calendar for WordPress. We also have Loxy, a little plug, best events calendar for not WordPress, everything else. But the truth is, our business started and is still predominantly a digital agency, right? We build big websites, platforms, software applications for all myriad of kind of enterprise clients. And a big reason that they come to us is because of our design services and the way that we work, right? So agenda today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what design systems are. Hopefully this is material that is sort of familiar to you because it's not revolutionary, but I'm going to talk about why they matter. And then as a person whose job it is to think about how we work, I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that I care about, right? The things that influence how we make decisions about how we work, things that I value. I'll run through our methodology, right? What's our workflows look like? And then a little bit about our tooling, right? Because as the title talks about, for me, this stuff has changed a great deal in a very short period of time. And then we'll have lunch instead of questions. It's like fixing your slides right before you go on. So what is a design system? Why should I care? These are probably terms that you've seen bandied about. Like much that we do in the digital space, everything that we think is revolutionary was probably done in some other industry before us better, right? Responsive design is an architecture term. That's great. So is design systems thinking. All this stuff, right? It's a pretty familiar pattern. There's a guy named Brad Frost who boiled this down for us. He did a very nice job. His analogy is this idea of atomic design, which is you have these little atoms and they form molecules. The molecules come together to form organisms. Then the analogy completely falls apart because we have templates and then pages, but you kind of get the gist, right? Right? Design systems it's the idea that you build this little system that will grow and add upon itself, and the end result, the output of the system, is sort of more than the sum of its parts, right? Yeah, so it's all coming together. Hopefully this is a thing that you're familiar with, and at Modern Tribe, it's been a thing that we've been really passionate about actually for a long time, right? If you've come to WordCamp Minneapolis before, you've seen me or Jeremy Ward blather on about how we can use modular thinking in the work that we do. But the thing that for me has really shifted in recent months is to consider that the thing that we do and the thing that we provide to our clients isn't the end, what we think of as end deliverable. So we don't think about how you're hiring us to build you a website, right? The website is the product of the design system that is actually the thing that we're doing, right? And when I say design system, that goes for everybody, regardless of your particular role. So designers may interface or engage with that design system via design tools that you know. But your engineering team is also going to engage and interface with that system through markup and code. And your business owners and your strategists and all those people are going to engage with your system in terms of user expectations or requirements, right? And the end user is not going to use your website. They're going to exist in and of the system that you have built for them, right? It's a subtle thing. At the end of the day, you still have a website or a piece of software. But that shift in methodology, that shift in thinking to say that what I'm actually here to do is to build a system and not a website, actually has some pretty profound impacts on how you do the work, the tools that you use, how you engage or how you collaborate with other individuals. It can really sort of change your thinking. And when you acknowledge that that's what you're doing, man, life can get a lot better. quick interlude, quick pause, story about a designer who 5-6 years ago was the lead on a design project for a European newspaper. Great project, super cool, very ambitious, big, somebody really proud of the work. We were hired only to provide strategy and design, which is fine, that's great. But I was worried about implementation. Handing your design work off to outside folks is always nerve-wracking. And so I'm thinking, I need to document the heck out of this thing, right? I have to think about every nth degree, put it down on paper so that when I hand this off and they build it, it's going to be the thing that I intended it to be. And so this is the folder structure that I ultimately handed off. And within each one of these folders, there's probably 5 to 10 additional deliverables or views, right? Inside each one of these Photoshop files, we're talking 150 some files, right? Every single one annotated, labeled, every piece of typography. This is the font, this is the letter spacing, this is the line height, this is the margins and the paddings and the vertical rhythm. Everything broken out. I'm taking like a victory lap. This is the best work that I've done, right? Comes back, unbeknownst to me, outside of my purview from corporate. Oh, they've been doing some brand updates. Oh, there's new typefaces. And I go in, one by one, open 150 Photoshop files, and go layer by layer by layer and start changing typefaces. But the line heights are all different. So that means every single element on every single page is now 2% off where it's supposed to be. And the experience of going through and fixing all of these things was enough to me to think like, maybe landscape architecture is a job I could do, right? Like anything but this, right? And this is at the time when like, you know, newspaper websites, real long, lots of stuff, big files. Those files take 4, 5, 8 minutes to open. I learned how to play the ukulele, you know? So the pain that comes with this experience is because the tool that I'm using is not designed to produce a system, which is what I'm trying to do here. The tool that I'm using is designed to produce individual things, right? And that delta, that pain is excruciating, right? We got paid, it's fine. Like everybody lived happily ever after. But this is not what I want to do with my life, right? And now, after some shifts in our workflow and some changes to things, these kinds of adaptations or these kinds of changes this would take me 4 hours, take me, you know, half a day or something like that, rather than the 2 weeks or whatever of mind-numbing work that it did, right? And you may say, Reid, I don't design European newspapers. Okay, that's fair. 2 thoughts for you. 1, say nice things about people. And 2 is Gutenberg, right? Regardless of what your thoughts may be about Gutenberg, it is coming. And it is going to force you to think about how the things that you designed are going to be extended, right? The days of individual deliverables where you present a comp and then it gets built and it looks perfect and beautiful, those days are over, right? For a lot of us, they were over a long time ago, but now you're not going to be able to avoid it. And so whether you think that you're designing a system or an individual deliverable isn't going to matter. You are designing a system, and you're probably doing it poorly. Right? So, inevitable. This is what we do. How are we doing? We're good? 13 minutes? It's going to be tight, people. What do I care about, right? When we're going to reboot our workflows, we're going to think about how we work. These are the things that I care about. And you know, for me, I like to do this exercise. I like to step back and think about the work that we do and have some, you know, you're going to see this stuff and it's going to be like, okay, great, touchy-feely stuff. But it really is meaningful, impactful, and it gives me something when I'm evaluating how we do things, whether or not it's the right decision. I got to have some touch point. I got to have something to go back to. And the thing that's neat about this is going to get a little bit weird and a little bit like circular logic here. We're talking about our workflows, right? That is a system, right? We build this design system, and the system outputs design systems for our clients, right? And what's neat about this is the values that I think apply to the way that we work are values that apply to the output of our work as well. And hopefully that starts to make sense. Speed. The first thing I care about is speed. I live in a capitalist society. I run an agency. I have mouths to feed. I need to be able to get work done quickly. That's part of how we exist. The thing that goes along with this, though, is that for me, the real magic actually happens in editing. It happens in revisions. It happens in iterations. And so I want our teams to be able to go from 0 to something very quickly. I have no love for white documents, like empty blank page inspiration. Sure, you want to wander in the woods and paint the raft of Medusa, go for it. That's not what we do, right? So I want to go from 0 to something very quickly. Same goes for the design systems that we give to our clients. I want them to be able to quickly produce work. Little bit different is that idea of dexterity, right? I don't want that experience of having to change or iterate or make some adjustments to my system be so onerous that I don't want to do it, right? I want my workflows to be such that we can quickly play, that we can quickly experiment and iterate on our work, because that's how I believe it gets better. And there is inertia to making changes to your work, right? Anybody get close to the end of a project and think, oh, I kind of missed this thing and it kind of looks bad, and now the effort to go back and fix it in all of these different places, I'll get it next time, right? I don't want to do that. I don't want that. Consistency, right? I want our workflows to be consistent. I want our workflows to be repeatable, right? And I want the people working within that system to naturally want to work the way that it works. In the same way that the design systems that we output, I want the content that it creates, the bits and the bobs and the blocks and the atoms and all those things, I want them to want to fit into the correct space, right? I want consistent, thoughtful systems. Because when I break that, they become extremely meaningful, right? If we're going to break out of our workflow, somebody says, well, for this project or in this instance, there are some certain things that we are going to do differently. We're going to break our methodology for a reason. That gets to be really powerful. And your design systems and your output, everything is nice and neat and tight, and then you break that intentionally, it becomes extremely powerful. Accessible. I mean this in both the WCAG sense of the word. I want everybody to be able to come and work at Modern Tribe and do fantastic work, right? But I also want our systems to be approachable. I do not want to have this experience where people are afraid to talk to design or to engage with the design system because it is too intimidating or it's too enigmatic or there's too much, rock star designer bullshit on top of it. I'm not interested in any of that. I want accessible things that people, regardless of their role or their experience, can engage with. Reusability, straight up, things that you can do twice are better than things that you do once. That's it. They are more valuable to everybody. Scalable. This is a big one for me, right? I love this phrase about being able to punch above your weight, right? Our systems and the way that we work enables our tiny but mighty design team to output an extremely high volume of work. The ratio of design heads to engineering heads within our organization is incredibly lopsided. And part of that is because our workflows and the way that we work enables individuals or very small teams to output massive systems, right? We do not shy away from really expansive projects because our systems enable, very talented people, no lie, our design team is great. But the way that we work amplifies their greatness. And it's got to evolve, right? I am knocking on the door of 40, It's a thing that's going to happen to me. In 1990, I think, is when Photoshop was still was introduced, right? I was about 12. I did not have a copy then. This isn't that story where I was like, and I was the first one, and no, that's ridiculous. I had a Commodore. Like, there was no Photoshop on that thing. But in 1995, when I was a sophomore in high school, I did get a copy of Photoshop. And essentially, for the next, you do the math, number of years, probably 6 days a week, at some point during the day, I opened this piece of software. No joke. I have a longer, deeper, more extensive relationship with this piece of software than almost anybody else or any other thing in my entire life. That's a little bit sad, but also it's indicative of how stagnant this idea, this approach to building things and the tools that we have is, right? I don't want that for our systems. I want our systems to continually grow. Same with the output, same with the things that we give our clients. They have to be able to grow and evolve and get better, right? There's this thing that I harp on at work all of the time, and it's this idea of continual incremental improvements, 1% gains. Those are things that I care about. I want to make that a daily thing, and I want to apply that to the way we work and the stuff that we output. Whew. Okay. So those are the values that sort of guide how we make decisions about how we work. Let's actually just talk brass tacks. What do we output? How do we output it? I want us to get on the same scale because there's a lot of ways that you can talk about design, workflow, and systems and things like that, right? At the very highest, you can say, we learn, and then we iterate, and then we evaluate, and then we repeat. That's great. We tell all our clients that. Everybody tells all their clients that. You're not wrong. And at the sort of most granular, you could pick anything that I'm going to talk about, and it's actually going to go through its own workflow of requirements gathering and discovery and user stories and wireframings and prototyping and testing, all that sort of stuff, right? It's sort of like very granular, but I'm going to try and hang out somewhere in the middle. I got a little bit bored when I was making my slides. This is kind of like roughly our approach, right? Somewhere in the sort of middle of those two degrees. And we do some mood boarding and some tone exploration and also some examples of this work so you can kind of see what it ends up looking like. But it's really the space from key deliverable to kitchen sink to secondary deliverable into pattern abstraction. This is when we're thinking about the fact that we're building a system, this is what has changed. So a previous workflow, you would think I design a homepage, and then I design a secondary page, and then I design an article, and then I design search, and then I design my blog, and then I design my article, and then I have a blah, 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 right? You design all those things, and then you're done when you've checked all of those boxes. Cool. We've now inserted some of these things where we're actually, if our goal is to design a system, how do we do that? How do we think about that? After all of that blather, you say you're designing a system, but your first thing that you do is an initial key deliverable. That's like a homepage or something, just like you all know. If you drop a big pile of Legos on a table and you've got 20 years of experience with those Legos, you can see the Millennium Falcon. You know it's there, right? If you don't have 20 years of experience, you see some idiot who's trying to sell you a $500,000 pile of Legos, right? Doesn't work very well. So we still do this stuff, right? We still design a homepage. And then we step back and we have this thing that we call the kitchen sink. And that's all the way back to those little atoms, right? H tags, P tags, bullets, lists, HRs, button styles, color swatches, right? All of that stuff. We start to hash out those things. We just look at those things in isolation and think about them. And then we jump from that back to another fully cooked deliverable, right? And the thing that's sort of interesting, the thing that I see a lot of people make some mistakes on, is they try and get one thing done, and then they go to the next thing. They try and get that done, and they go to the next thing. That is a recipe for increasingly crappy work, right? We don't fight that, right? We bounce back and forth between these things. And ultimately, we start to have enough in front of us that we can do this kind of pattern recognition, right? We can start to see what are the patterns that are evolving from the kinds of work that we're doing. And can I make some adjustments to make those patterns tighter, more efficient, more reusable, faster, scalable, all those kinds of things, right? And once I do that, once that pattern starts to become more and more clear, it looks messy before it gets clear. The second sort of engagement goes much, much, much faster, right? Because the system knows what it needs to output. So I can start to build those components and tertiary deliverables, right? Once the system is running, it can start to, this is where we get the scaling, right? We have all of this logic. You throw another set of objectives or challenges to us, the system knows what to do to solve those problems, right? And this gets to be much, much more efficient. There's refinement and design QA. This little behavior here, this is forever, right? This is that understanding that like the work that we do, these systems, they're not done ever. You ship, that's just day one. Day two, you start to refine, you start to add patterns, you prune your patterns in your systems, right? You continue to babysit and take care of that thing. So acknowledge that this is a thing that goes on forever. Whether it's you doing this or somebody else doing this, your system will want to break down, right? That's entropy. Things want to break down over time. So is true of the design systems and the tools and the things that we make. This is how they don't look like garbage, right? This is how they stay up.
You're halfway.
I'm halfway? It says 25 minutes. We're gonna have time for questions, people. So what do we actually create? We do some mood boarding. Mood boards look exactly like what you think they look like. They don't look any different for us. I don't really enjoy it. Clients love it. Okay, cool. It's a feel good, whatever. The thing that I do love, I have clients, and I don't know if they're in the room, but hi. The thing that we do that I love are these little vignettes. And these are things that like, so we do this before we do any of that sort of deliverable stuff. This is like really early on, right? We just make stuff. This isn't, we're not worried about your navigation. We're not worried about your structure. There are other work streams that are dealing about those things. We just start to design little elements, right? And we think about like all of the objectives. They are informed and thoughtful elements. But this is the kind of stuff that like you can start to have a conversation with whomever is on the other side, say, oh, well, what do you think about some of these things, right? We can start to gather some really insightful feedback here without getting lost in kind of the intricacies of really specific user-driven, objective-driven engagements, right? This is like, oh, cool. I don't know, do you like this? Is this working? I particularly dislike this move here, right? That's okay, because we have very little invested in this time, right? This is where we're playing. And then we go into this, like I'm talking about, initial deliverables, right? So we already have tone established. We already have look and feel established. We know what game we're playing, right? And so we make a website. You know what websites look like. Then we step back and we start to go into this kitchen sink, right? This is what it looks like. I didn't want to give my secret sauce away, so it's real small. I'm just kidding. This is a repeatable thing that we do on every single project. And that means all of the structure, all of this approach, that's already cooked. We're good. And so if you're going to start from scratch and start to produce one of these systems and you're going to start at zero, it's going to take you a really long time. Our system, the way that we work, is repeatable. So kitchen sink, super granular. There's like grid systems, there's colors and there's swatches, there's all those kinds of things that you would think about. This is your entire HTML stack, right? Anything that somebody can put in with a WYSIWYG, you can control and style and define here as part of your system, including things that you may not see, things like spacing grids, vertical rhythm, right? That was the thing that we used to really struggle with to make sure that our work had that quality. And as soon as we built it into our workflow as a standard part of the systems that we create, it got really easy, right? That's how that work, all of your work gets better. That system makes the folks in the system better. And we do it for forms and things as well, right? All of this here is cooked. Every single form and UI that you could think about is represented in our kitchen sink as well. And we'll do this for light and dark. We will do this for desktop and mobile, because I really hate when desktop typography goes down to mobile. It's bad work, right? But it's really expensive to do things multiple times. So how can we systematize all of those kinds of workflows so that we get high-level output for all of those values that I'm talking about, right? And the thing that's neat about this, everything that we have represented here in design is represented in our engineering framework as well. One-to-one relationship between everything you see on the screen and everything that when you fire up a new environment to start building your website, all of that stuff is tied together because we're all building the same system, right? They have to be the same. All of those bits and bobs have to map. A secondary deliverable, like I said, is another thing. You guys know what that looks like. And then this is where we start to go and identify the system, right? We start to look for and define what are the things that go into the systems. And so these are what our deliverables like actually start to look like, right? And so if somebody's like, oh, this is all work for a university site. Somebody says, oh, hey, we need a demonstrate. We're going to go meet with the athletic department. Can you show us what that could look like? And then we have conversation about requirements and objectives and all that. But the actual like design effort, piece of cake, right? Because the system knows what it needs to output, right? Some examples of these kinds of components, right? This is like really insider baseball right now. Images and text paired together, right? This is on every website produced in all of time, right? But it's a component. This is a part of our pattern, right? And it's a really abstract component. And we have components or we have bits and bobs that are maybe less abstract, but still repeatable and still reusable. So FAQ blocks and bio faculty things, right? You can see how we're engaged in a university project, how this idea of like faculty presentation needs to be consistent and frequent and shows up all over the place. And if you've looked at an average university website, something that is large, every single one looks different. One of them looks good and the rest of them look like garbage. And it's because there is no system to control all of those outputs, right? So here we have. And then we have really specific parts of these systems, right? This is like a countdown module. Countdown modules are not real useful, right? In a specific instance, it's great. It's not a seriously like repeatable pattern. That's okay. It's a thing that the system needs to output, so it's going to exist within our design system. But you can see everything that makes it up, right? Going a step more granular is part of the system, right? So outputting these new components or modules or expanding the design system that we have gets really, really sort of easy and kind of fun to do, right? And that's okay. Not everything has to be so abstracted that it doesn't speak to a very specific, isolated use case. It's fine, right? We do a thing called design QA, which after that whole rigmarole that I talked about, we will actually go back through after production, or not after a ship to a production environment, but after execution, engineering has built all of the system within markup, and then we'll refine again, right? We'll try and tighten everything up. And that's expensive, it is, but that level of commitment to the solidity of the system is what makes the work still look good 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
About 10 minutes.
Cool, we're doing good. Wait, 10 minutes until lunch is served?
10 minutes till 5 minutes
Oh, right on. So the tools, like these are the actual like changes that we have rolled out. Dropbox. I don't actually think of Dropbox as part of like our design stack. Sweet Dropbox. It has saved my ass so many times. I keep swearing on camera. Hi, universe. So, but it does this. Home final RP2, right? Anybody have files that look like this? So we're done. We're done with Dropbox. And we've adopted a product called Abstract. Abstract is so cool. It's essentially version control for all of your design files and assets. So if you're a developer, this is a thing that you've been doing for a very long time and you think is just standard practice. On the design side, we're real excited about these kinds of tools, right? So our file management is actually now, we've brought that into our design systems thinking, right? So we have master files, and you branch those files, and you can make changes to them, and you can commit your changes, and then you can merge your files back. That is bonkers on the design side, how cool that is. And you know, if you're a solo person, just like using Git, there's some benefits there, but as soon as there are two people, this thing is fantastic and amazing. And honestly, like as an old curmudgeon, I was like, you're solving a problem we don't have, people. Not true. This is a problem that we had, and the solution is way better. Much like Git or SVN, the first time that I had to learn that, I was like, I FTP this stuff. What's the problem? What could possibly go wrong? Right? Hopefully you've not learned that lesson the hard way. So anyway, this is what it starts to look like, and it's really had some kind of massive positive impacts on the way that the team works, the way that the team collaborates to kind of produce this stuff, right? I have people working on the same file, not 150 Photoshop files. I have multiple people working on the same file all at the same time. Think about that when you then want to scale your agency and you have multiple teams, right? Multiply all of those incremental gains by 50, right? Now you're talking. So aside from that, the design stack, I generally think of it in kind of these buckets, right? You have tools that you use to actually produce or design, create new things. And then you've got tools for prototyping or collaborating or getting feedback, engaging with people outside of your particular discipline. And then you've got transition tools, right? And in the old days, as of like, a year ago, or the last 30 years, design and creation happened in Photoshop. Illustrator, maybe. To be honest, InDesign was always better built to do web design or systems design work than anybody would acknowledge. Got a bad rap in design. But yeah, Photoshop is where we spent all of this time. Prototyping and collaboration. If you wanted to prototype, if anybody has been around and needed to like present walkthroughs or click-throughs, like image mapping, like heat mapping, like what? The fact that we were still doing that to like make this, take our designs and make prototypes out of them is ridiculous and embarrassing as part of this design community. Or we just build stuff in HTML, right? Which we still do sometimes. And then transitions and handoffs. Either you are producing incredibly detailed and annotated versions of your work, or you're handing Photoshop files to your engineers, and then they hate you. That's the reality, right? Nobody wants that. So what's it look like today? We have primarily shifted to Sketch to be our primary design tool. We still use Photoshop and Illustrator. When you need to produce a thing, it's great, right? If you need to do in illustration, that's fantastic. But the system that we're designing, our primary tool right now is Sketch. And for prototyping and collaboration, this has been such like a huge boon to our business. So we have a tool called Craft that mirrors or marries all of our Sketch and our sort of traditional design assets out into prototypes, presentation layers, Our team is a huge fan of a product called Freehand. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. So we do use this sort of like full InVision suite, and I really love it. It's great. It's another thing that I was like, seems like really not that big a deal. I just say, I'm going to show my work, whatever. We have a project management tool. I don't need this. Huge amounts of benefit, right? I can make one change in a sketch file that updates my entire system. I can do 2 button clicks, and all of that will output into our prototype, which is already shared with our clients or whatever, right? Where we can then comment on it and track all that conversation. It's been super great. And then right now we're using a tool called Inspect, which allows sort of the engineering team to get into and see the details of your design system without necessarily having to produce extraneous documentation or give them direct sort of file access, that sort of open Photoshop stuff. Here's what it kind of looks like. This is Sketch, super tiny. It's really annoying. But if you could see this, you would see that like our structures in our sketch files actually mirror the kinds of systems and those folders that I was talking about when we're doing this sort of tragic newspaper work, right? We still do a lot of that. Our design team still runs the system to produce all of the various views and outputs and specific deliverables that we need to do. But we also have the patterns and the symbols. And in our organizations, they're called components and panels. They'll likely be called blocks and rows, or they'll be called whatever the heck you want to call them. It's all sort of represented here in these files. This is what Inspect ends up sort of looking like. Down in the little blob here, you can see all of it'll output CSS for you. I don't think our developers actually use any of that. It's not like they're copying, that's how we generate our files. But, which you won't notice because it's tiny, each of these elements from our kitchen sink surfaces with the same name and label as the CSS classes that power our kitchen sinks, right? Trying to shorten the gap between design and engineering so that these people cannot miss that they're building out the same system at the same time. This is what Freehand looks like. Tried to look for like a cool and impressive version of Freehand, which is not what it does. It's a space where you can essentially like doodle. You can share things and you can doodle. And I can't like shortchange like how valuable that is. We are a remote company, which means the people are not sitting next to me, and our clients are hardly ever in the same room as me. And so we don't get to do the like cool design agency thing where we print everything out, and there's always lots of glass and Post-it notes around and like fashionably dressed people like, oh yeah. Like we don't get to do any of that. We get to do this instead. Kyle is our design director. I'm not sure why it says Kyle with a question mark there, but it's likely just like, what are you talking about? And then prototypes. This is a quick peek at the InVision prototype screen for all of the events calendars Gutenberg exploration, right? Each one of those files, like if you can imagine having to like work in Photoshop, make a change, save it out, upload a JPEG to some other like hard-coded prototype, every one of those iterations would take forever. And your desire to explore the possibilities of what this new UI could do for your product in your business, the desire to get into that would be very low, right? It would be very hard to play and to iterate and to test things and tweak things and learn things. So the fact that all of that happens now much faster has some pretty dramatic impact on overall business, right?
5 to launch.
So where is it going? This is my assumption, right? For 20 years, it was products like Adobe and Azure and whatever. There's more than just that, but it was these big mammoth behemoths, right? This is the Oracle and the SAP of the design world. And what we see now is those things fragmenting, right? And even within these fragments, we're going to start to see consolidation, right? Almost every one of these things down below is now started as one of those kind of components, right? InVision was primarily like a prototyping tool. They now have InVision Studio, which is a design design product. Framer and Figma, all of these kinds of things are now starting to try and grab more of this overall flow. So we're going to see some fall away, some of those get bigger, I'm assuming those things will break up again. And if I were to give this talk next year, likely the tools are going to be different. And I'm super excited about that, right? After 20 years of being like, cool, I have Photoshop and I have a text editor and that's the stack that I have to work with. Now I have this sort of like robust environment, and as long as we as an organization are committed to continually making those kinds of incremental improvements, all of our work is going to get better, our design systems are going to get better, the things that we build are going to get better over time. Bam. Did we make it?
Oh yeah, we have 3 minutes. Questions?
Yeah, I just had a question. So I primarily work in an in-house department. So all these tools are always kind of like that I hear about coming out to these conferences are always changing and different. What's a good resource to kind of keep up with all those tools?
Oh man, have smart friends. My dirty little secret is my company doesn't let me do any of this kind of work anymore. But what happens is the people that are around me are out there playing with things. They're like, oh, hey, I tried abstract. It's pretty neat. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And they're like, no, really, it's actually pretty neat. And then somebody else is like, oh, I went to a conference. I saw this thing. I tried it for 10 minutes. I think it's worth exploring. And that, to be honest, like that is from my standpoint, like how our systems are evolving, are smart, engaged people, and then listen to them when they suggest things. And from their standpoint, they have this like old curmudgeon that doesn't want to change anything and doesn't want to spend money or buy new tools or any of those kinds of things. And they just continually do it anyway, and then demonstrate all the value that it has. Everybody's hungry.
One more? Everyone's hungry? One more? We could do one. No? We're good. Thank you,
Cool.
Reid. We will go to lunch.